Hi there, my name is Ray Austin with Austin Air Company. Today's topic is going to be New Air Conditioning Freon Phase Down Part 2B, Refrigerant Wars. This is going to be the second part to Refrigerant Wars. If you haven't watched the previous versions, there will be links in the description giving you a place to go back and watch those previous parts. I'd recommend that you do that. The Refrigerant Wars, this is the second part number 2, to Refrigerant Wars, part 2B. There will be an additional part 2C. We're going to get right into this. Stay tuned. So this is chart 6. This goes into potentially showing you if you look to the right of the chart, table 2, Interium Solutions, you've got R32, R452, and R454B. And you can see clearly R452B is 677, which is just as bad as R32. That's why I don't think they'll use it, because it's more complicated to produce it. So why would they use it when it's just as bad or worse than R32 in terms of GWP? And then the charge is more, meaning they need more refrigerant in the unit than what you would need with R32. So it just doesn't, it's not likely to be chosen. So the majority of the manufacturers are choosing R454B. But, is it really the best? You got to realize it's going to cost you more because part of that refrigerant is R1234YF. When I say that, it sounds like I'm making it up. But, R1234YF is a refrigerant that was designed for the automotive market. This was patented by Honeywell back in 2010, and so pretty much every auto made today uses R1234YF in an automotive. The problem with transferring this to the residential air conditioning market is that it was designed for an automobile. It was not designed for your home air conditioner. And so they've had to manipulate it, and they manipulate it by adding R32 to it. And the other complication with R454B, and the reason why it's going to cost more, is because the R1234YF component is patented. And so you're going to pay that patent holder, which is Honeywell, you're going to pay them for being able to have the ability to produce it. And so while R454B has the best GWP, you're going to need more of that refrigerant to charge a comparable R410A unit. It's about 10% less than what you would need in R410, but it's not quite as good as R32, because R32 of a comparable R410A machine would need 20% less of the charge of R410A. But as we've stated previously, R32 is not a drop-in, nor is R454B. The equipment has to be replaced in order to use any specific refrigerant. You can't mix and match and pick and choose. The same thing would be like if you drive a gasoline-powered car, and you drove to the gas station and you put in diesel gas into your unleaded gasoline car, what do you think is going to happen? It's not going to work. And so it'd be the same difference if your car requires diesel and you go to the store and you fill it up with unleaded gasoline. It's not going to work. You're going to have your tank pumped out. And so on that chart, just below, you can see the compressor design and cost. You've got DT / oil and envelope. The DT is the discharge temperature. That's primarily because all that other stuff will be worked out once you figure out the discharge temp. They've already done it in Europe. So R32 is a working refrigerant. There is no extra work, unless the manufacturer in question does not have any Europe manufacturing going on. See these, there's several, there's a couple, there's probably more than a couple that have they're global, that produce equipment for global markets. And so the efficiency versus R410A plus 1 to 2% on R32, 0% on the R454B. And then they note that if it's equal capacity, meaning, if it's a 4-ton unit, for R410A, it's a 4-ton unit for whatever. Flammability, burn velocity, A2L. It looks like R32 is slightly more flammability, but I think at the end of the day, it's that's really not going to matter much. They're both considered mildly flammable. Now you'll see here R32 refrigerant cost is green. So in other words, R32 is going to be cheaper. So if you're anticipating having to repair that equipment later on down the line, it's going to be cheaper if you go the R32 route. If you go the R454B route, and you'll note that they say R1234YF cost. It's to tell you that, you have a repair, and one thing you got to realize, manufacturers do not cover refrigerant. They consider it a consumable. So, you buy a unit with a 10-year warranty or 12-year warranty, whatever it is, that does not include refrigerant. If the unit springs a leak, they're only going to give you the part to repair the leak. They ain't going to supply you the refrigerant. Now, there's been some companies that will go out there and they will guarantee you a system. That's entirely up to that company. But one thing you got to realize, if you're paying $1,000 a drum for refrigerant and some company is saying, oh yeah, we'll warranty this, no cost, the money that you spend, putting in the equipment, we're going to warranty it for life, whatever the gimmick is, the gimmick of the month is. I see the gimmicks on TV and I know they're gimmicks because no company is going to continue to give you free refrigerant for life when the refrigerants are going to be obsolete and the prices are only going to go up. You're talking bankrupt city. The companies would go bankrupt. So, and if you're being pushed in that direction from a company, and they're saying, hey, we'll cover it for life, you better be sure and pull out that contract and read the fine print, because I can guarantee you they are playing a shell game that you ain't going to win. Another important issue in terms of refrigerant cost, like let's say, for example, R32 does go up in cost. Well, it's going to affect R454B because 69% of R454B is none other than R32. So you understand, and this also goes into play saying that R32 is this next generation refrigerant. We've been using, R410A is 50% R32, 50% R125. It's not a next gen refrigerant. We've been using it for over 20 years. So, this is to show you the myth, the myths that the games that manufacturers like to play. I don't know why they don't just lay out the argument and just compare it for what it is. Tell it like it is, let the chips fall where they may, and let somebody make a decision based on the facts and not just a bunch of hoopla. That's what this video is about. It's to show you that going forward, if you're not using someone that you trust, you're going to get duped. So that leads me to the Dupe Meister. Chart 7. Now, there's nothing wrong with Daikin, it's just whoever their marketing person is. Part of this is, this chart really lays it out, because what they're doing here, they take R32 and they stack it against the old previous refrigerants. R22 is on the way out. We haven't used R12 and probably, I don't even know. It seems to me R12 was in the old 1980s cars, automobiles, why they're using that as a reference. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I can understand why they would use R22, but why don't they include R454B? Why? So it just doesn't make sense. And so I go on to say, I show this chart mostly to show the scale of badness. ODP R22 Freon was phased out and banned for 0.1% of ozone depletion potential, ODP. So you honestly think these refrigerants, with being hundreds of times worse than carbon dioxide, stand a chance of not being eventually banned? So, it's cut and dry right there. I mean, you don't even have to watch the rest of the video unless you want to see, some other arguments. This is essentially it. Whatever you choose in the coming years, whether it's now or whether it's next year or the year after, these choices are likely going to be gone probably within another 10 to 15 years. Now, does that mean that you won't be able to repair an R410A unit if you buy a new R410A unit now? No, it doesn't mean that. Obviously there's going to be complications because of this SEER to SEER 2 change. It's hard to say, what changes that's going to involve in terms of refrigerant flows and whether they're only going to design these new changes for the new refrigerant, this Interium solution, until you get to rip everything out here in another 10 to 15 years beyond, 2023, 2024, 2025, when all these changes start hitting hard. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. And so in my mind, the way a lot of this nonsense, the only way it's going to affect you is if you buy a new R410A machine now and it springs a leak, you're going to pay more for refrigerant in order to repair it. That's, in terms of what it's going to cost you to fix it, it's going to depend on what's wrong with it. But the thing is, if you buy an R32 unit now or an R410A unit now, you may escape a lot of this nonsense, because especially if you buy a good unit, meaning that you buy a unit that's upper tier, 20 SEER, somewhere in those realms, and typically 20 SEER is going to be an inverter, so you're going to spend some money on a machine like that. But there's ways to cut those costs, and there's ways to get things reasonable, and so that might be your better choice. Are there complications to doing that? Sure. It's like anything else. There is no silver bullet. It is what it is. And the choices are going to only get more difficult as time goes on. So let's move to this next chart, chart 8. Approximately 10% reduction in electricity consumption. Now, this is partly geared toward the R32 refrigerants being more energy efficient, and you can see here the graphic shows a smaller bubble R32, and that demonstrates that there's less of a charge that goes into an R32 unit. So because there's less refrigerant, it's less cost. It's going to cost you less to maintain an R32 unit. Just realize that R32 is not going to be the widely adopted equipment. Most likely it's only going to be a couple manufacturers. There might be, if they start selling a lot of it, if one manufacturer is doing a booming business, you think these other manufacturers aren't going to jump ship and start producing an R32 unit? So that's partly what goes into this refrigerant wars mentality, is because one thing you got to realize is that when R410A came out, adoption was extremely slow. Because everybody was afraid of it. Oh, well, if I put this thing in, the pressures are higher, it requires a special oil, it requires this, it requires that, you got to replace more in order to do it, you've got the mixing of oils, you got yada, 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 so on and so forth, and you've got the potential of disaster. So, pretty much probably about 2013, 2014, a lot of installers were still selling R22 units. And so, but today, it's going to cost you a fortune to try to keep an R22 unit. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to do it, especially for a hot climate, like I live in. So the biggest con with this chart 8 is that, again, Daikin chooses not to list R454B, which is a competing refrigerant. They, it's almost like they're trying to, I mean, why not show you the whole ball of wax, and let the chips fall where they may. One other thing to note is that Daikin is a manufacturer of R32. So they have an interest of staying with R32. It's another component of this refrigerant war mentality, because if you control the refrigerant market, you control the market. So let's not kid ourselves here. This is big money. We're talking big global companies fighting for market share. They want to control the whole ball of wax. Wouldn't you? I spell it out. I go places where most are afraid to go, and it is what it is. There is no perfect manufacturer. Get it out of your head that there is going to be some perfect manufacturer, because these refrigerants are what rule the roost. It's typically going to be what drives replacements. If refrigerant goes to $1,000, $2,000 a drum for any particular refrigerant, you think somebody's going to spend that money when they can just go out and buy a new unit with a different refrigerant? So which camp are you going to be in? Leave your comments in the comment section. Let's get a discussion going. So chart, let's see, this is going to be chart number 9. And so this chart basically shows global HFC phase down targets. Now you see that Europe is quite a ways ahead of the United States. Developing nations are obviously far behind. So you can see that band, 750 GWP, between 750 and 350 GWP. Now you can see that the United States is trying to get below that 350 GWP for very important reasons, because the Kigali Amendment, has thresholds that, richer nations need to hit. So, United States is considered a richer nation. You may not feel rich over the past couple of years, with rampant inflation and everything going ballistic here in the United States. You may not feel all that rich. But anyways, this is what their target is. I mean, if you look really close, they're shooting for 2035. This Build Back Better thing is, suggesting the world's going to end if we don't get our act together by 2030. So take it for what it is, but you can see the chart off to the right, U.S. HFC phase down challenge. You can see the challenge because you've got millions of metric tons of CO2. Can't read it. Oh, CO2 equivalent. And so you can see how they're trying to drop that down over the course of the coming years. But then you've not only got older structures, you've also got newer structures being built. Currently, I mean, there's a shortage of homes in the United States, and so builders are maxed out, with building. And so, I mean, if you build a structure with old technology, well, that's going to be an expense for that homeowner going forward. So, I mean, if you're going to do it, you would be more inclined to do it now, when, the building industry is, building at a rampant pace. But there's other issues with that due to the pandemic and due to the lockdowns of this, that, and the next, and so what are you going to do? So this next chart 10, this is a somewhat confusing chart. I mean, I really had to look at this for quite some time to figure this thing out and see what they're doing. If you look to the left of the chart, you'll see, or toward the middle of the chart, you'll see R410A, and I'll highlight it on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. You'll see R410A, and you'll see an arrow. But if you look toward the bottom part of that chart, you'll see the GWP level, and see an R410A is above 2000. It's like 2088, 2075, depending on what chart or what graphic you look at. But R410A is on the cusp of being phased out. And so you look over to that 3C header, 750 GWP Interium. Now that Interium thing that I have trouble pronouncing for whatever reason, R32, R454B. I'm not gonna stop mentioning R452B because it's not likely to see the light of day. So I'm just going to stop mentioning that altogether. But if you see, they're trying to, there's a couple of things. You've got capacity, you've got pressures, because they've got R1, 2, 3 like very low pressure down there toward the bottom of that chart. And so essentially what they're showing here is that you've got the first Interium step down in 3C, which is R32 and R454B, and then the next step down, well, there's a potential, they say here, as a number 2 step down, 300 to 400 with an R32 HFO blend. Now, currently, I don't think there is anything in that realm. And so if you look to the right hand of the chart, you can see the range of GWP with good efficiency. You can see that R32, one interesting thing down toward the bottom of that chart on the left-hand side, 3A, it says significant efficiency penalty with pure HFO 1234YF. So see, that's why they can't get air conditioning to work with air conditioning, is because there's a significant efficiency penalty. In other words, your light bill would go sky high, and you'd be saying, "Oh, why the hell? I got a $500 light bill. What the hell's going on?" Yeah, it's because your new refrigerant that you put in your new unit. So you can see the ramifications of this. It's not just finding a substance that's going to do it, but it's got to be environmentally friendly. It's got to be efficient. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. You've got to be able to work with it. It's got to be available. And so there's so many moving parts and pieces to this that it's enough to drive you insane. I mean, this video is going to be long. I mean, I already know it. There's no way around it. So skip around, watch it to its entirety, do whatever you want. And so if you look to the left of chart 10, it gets a little confusing as the timeline is flipped to show the decrease in GWP level at the bottom on the left of that chart. You see R32, R452B, and R454B labeled as 3C or 750 GWP Interium, meaning as time goes on, we're going to need to buy another new air conditioner. Some of these choices have problems that are widely known. Some of these choices may have problems that are not entirely known. As with R32 discharge temps, we already know that. Europe uses R32, and they've been using it for some time now. The other two are blends, so this really is going to correlate with R454B, is that it's a blend. It's 69% R32 and it's 31% R1234YF. And so the problem is if leaks develop with a blend, and we were widely thinking this was going to be a problem with R410A. It largely didn't turn out to be a problem, but I primarily think the reason why it wasn't a problem with R410A is because it's 50% R32 and 50% R125. And so it's essentially balanced going into the system. But, R454B is not balanced. 69% is R32, 31% is R1234YF. And so what happens if R1234YF, what happens if it bleeds off? If a leak develops in the system, if it bleeds off at a faster rate than R32, then you're going to get top heavy with a unit that's fully R32, which is only going to increase your cost. If those problems develop, if we determine these problems out in the field, well, what makes you think that we're going to continue to do that and continue to go back and do warranty repairs when something doesn't work right? That's not going to happen. So, we'll learn really quick what to do and what not to do, And so the other issue with R32 is the higher discharge temp. So if that R454B unit becomes overly populated with R32 due to a refrigerant leak, and the R1234YF leaks out, and then you go out there and you make a repair to the system and you add more virgin refrigerant in it, but now because the conundrum is shifted, now it has more R32 in the system than what it knows to do with. They didn't account for the higher discharge temperature of R32, and so that's going to lead to compressor failures. Discharge temp, heat kills compressors. Discharge is off the compressor. Plain as day. Want to buy another new air conditioner? So this next clip or chart, picture, whatever you want to call it, is something that I garnered. Now, I'm not entirely clear if this is accurate. I'm leaning to believe that, but one thing you got to take into context is that this was in France. If they're choosing R32 for United States, I don't know if they are or not. I haven't found anything to suggest that they're going to go to R454B. I haven't found anything that suggests they're going to use R32, so I simply do not know. This was something that I found, and why would they make the comment if it's not going to apply to the United States market? So, take it for what it is. Anyway, they go on to say Lennox products like its new eComfort range of inverter swirl chillers are using lower GWP refrigerant R32. France. Lennox is extolling the virtues of R32 over R454B as the optimum lower GWP replacement for R410A in chillers and rooftop units. Now, chillers and rooftop units doesn't apply to the residential market, so I don't know if they're only going to use it for those particular equipment segments, but I haven't found any information that leads me to believe that they're going to use R454B. So I'm kind of making a jump there based on the information that's available. While many of the company's competitors are promoting R454B as their preferred substitute, this is what leads me to believe they're going to choose R32. Lennox views R32 as the optimum R410A replacement. It argues that while R32 and R454B are both A2L refrigerants, meaning mildly flammable, with lower GWPs than R410A, R32 has the advantage of being an unpatented single component gas, refrigerant, whatever you want to call it, has no glide, and has price and availability advantages over its rival. In other words, it's cheaper than R454B. Now, no glide means essentially the symptom that I was telling you about. Different bleed-off rates if the unit ever gets a refrigerant leak. So, if the bleed-off rate for R1234YF is quicker than R32, you get disparities, and that's going to add to additional costs in labor because, once it's determined that if that occurs, then you're going to be paying for, people come out there and reclaim all the refrigerant, make the repair, and then sell you all new refrigerant at a higher cost because that refrigerant costs more. Plus, there's more labor involved. It's either that or you gamble, and due to the high discharge temperatures of R32 leads to compressor failures, which is going to cost you even more money. So that's it. So currently we've got Lennox that potentially is going to use R32, and we've got Daikin. Lennox makes Airflow and I think a couple other brands, but those are their entry-level value brands. Daikin, they make Amana, Goodman. They're probably one of the largest manufacturers in the world, of air conditioning equipment. They also make Daikin, It's essentially the same thing as Goodman and Amana brands. And so we move on to this next chart, and here Daikin, parent company of Goodman, I already said that. R32 next generation refrigerant, which is misleading because R32 is a component of our R410A, 50%. It's misleading. So, I spell it out like it is. My opinion is Daikin is trying to play a shell game here. For one, R32 is not a next generation refrigerant. R410A is 50% R32 and 50% R125. We've been using R410A for at least 20 years now. So how could R32 be a next gen refrigerant? It's not. And so this is it's just a flat out dumb statement why they would try to dupe somebody, making you think that it's something that it's not. So we'll leave that at that. And so if you live in the Katy, Texas area, you can give me a call at 832-475-6895. Or for more information, you can always visit me on my main website at www.austinairco.com. For Austin Air Company, my name's Ray Austin, and I hope your day is comfortable. Thank you. I don't know who you are, but I know that you probably want Freon. I can tell you that I have Freon, but it's not free. I cannot read minds or fix air conditioners over the phone. But what I can do is apply my knowledge and a unique set of skills that I have acquired over a very long HVAC career. Skills that can put an end to your discomfort. If you tell me where you are, I will find you. I will not stop until I find you. I will sell you Freon, and I may sell you a new air conditioner.